Good morning. My name is Chad Hensler. I'm a trade commissioner at the Consulate General of Canada here in Mumbai. We're going to give it a second because I know there's a whole bunch of people. There's a big crowd outside that was trying to get in, and we'd love to have them get in and have seats. Equally, we're going to be ad-libbing and jumping around in our schedule just a little bit. So I need a clicker. Can you put on the other deck? Go ahead about 20 slides. I'll have to see it. There's black slide with 3 faces. No, keep going. Keep going. Much further. And stop. Go back one. Put that up. Good morning. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming early. I know the main conference doesn't actually get started for another hour or so, so thank you for getting up, making your way all the way down here to the south end of the city just to be with us. So without further ado, I'm going to start, and I want to tell you 3 little stories about what's happening in Canada and what's happened in Canada. And to do that, we're going to go back in time a little bit. Then I'm going to turn it over to our new friend, Lloyed Lobo, who is an entrepreneur himself, runs an AI-based company, financial technology company. He himself is based in San Francisco, but has chosen to put a large part of his organization in Canada. He's going to tell you how and why. And finally, we're going to have our Consul General, Annie Dubé, give a bit of an overview of what's going on in Canada from a financial perspective and why Canada is a great place and a great partner for Indian fintech companies. So I want to tell just a quick little story. If you work in artificial intelligence, you would recognize these 3 names and these 3 photos. These gentlemen are who are considered the godfathers or the grandfathers of artificial intelligence. Geoffrey Hinton, you have to picture him as a 20-something-year-old university grad, fresh out of Cambridge, looking for some place he could study this idea that he had that computers could actually act like human brains through something called neural networks. Now, who in the world was going to invest in that 20, 30 years ago? The answer was the government of Canada. Through a program called the CFAR, the Canadian, it's an acronym, it'll come back to me. It's a Canadian government program that funds advanced research. He ended up at the University of Toronto, and while there developed all kinds of theories on neural networks and became what we think of as artificial intelligence today. Yoshua Bengio is really the father of deep learning. If you talk about deep learning, it's his theories that you're applying. And the final is Richard Sutton. The idea of reinforcement learning is his. All 3 are professors in Canada. Richard Sutton also is the most cited of all research papers, books in the industry in artificial intelligence and machine learning. His is the most cited. So way back when, these were the people doing really advanced research and actually became what is artificial intelligence today. If you're talking to somebody who has a PhD in machine learning or artificial intelligence today, it's almost guaranteed that they could trace their roots back to a professor who studied with one of these people. Because of their work, this is what the artificial intelligence ecosystem in Canada looks like today. So you can see the academic labs kind of over here, the universities are associated with it, and then these big chunks are the startups and the companies that are actively working in artificial intelligence in Canada today. Well, actually, this one's a year out of date, so I'm sure it's grown. but you can see how it's grown. Banking and fintech. Going way back in time to the Great Depression, the 1930s, the United States went one route and said, every bank has to be small. We don't want big banks because big banks fail. Canada took the exact opposite approach and said, no, we want some big banks and we just want to be able to regulate them easily. And you can only do that if you have big banks. US had something, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of banks throughout the 1970s and 1980s before consolidation. And it meant that those banks were so small they couldn't invest in technology. 6 Canadian banks for the entire country meant that they were actually the biggest purchasers of ATMs when ATMs, automatic teller machines, first became a thing. It meant that IBM and others chose Canada to be the home of their R&D centers, to be able to serve these massive clients. And what that meant today is all of that technology, all of those engineers, all of those people working in the fintech sector started leaving these big banks and running their own fintechs and running and seeing possibilities, exiting the big banks and going to start their own organizations, their own companies. And so there's a huge and vibrant startup community and fintech community in Canada, as well as big willing customers. The final piece, I'll go through this really quickly, but this is Alexander Graham Bell when he invented the telephone, sitting in Brantford, Ontario, Canada. That became a long history of telecommunications capability, massive companies, massive R&D research happening in Canada, meaning there's a huge, huge active group of labor, of people with talent and expertise in this area that's very long-standing. All of this talent actually comes out relatively price competitive, if you can believe it. This shows the relative cost of hiring a software engineer. And this, in terms of labor quality, is the number of graduates from the top 25 computer science programs in the world and where they are. And you can see over here are places like Toronto and Vancouver, well over into the high quality territory at a really competitive price point. So, and this is total cost of having that kind of labor. So my point out of all of this is, through this history, we've evolved to the point where there's actually really great capabilities available to you. If you're looking to develop, if you're looking to push your technology to the next level, the people that you need to work with are in Canada. And finally, in terms of accessing the North American market or the European market, this is all of the countries, most of the countries with which we have free trade agreements. The most important, I think, being both the United States through NAFTA or its evolution, and the European Union we also have a free trade agreement with. The dark blue states indicate the states in the United States where Canada is the #1 trading partner for that state. Light blue, I think, is where we're #2, and I have no idea where these states are buying from, so we'll go with that. But #1 trading partner for the vast majority of the United States is Canada. We have access to that market. A Canadian company can act as if they're an American company. It's transparent. No one can really see the difference as far as the clients go, and you have proximity. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. That was it for me. I wanted to give a bit of a history, a bit of a segue going back in time. We're going to switch over to the PDF that was just given to you guys on a stick. And I'm going to take this opportunity to introduce Lloyed Lobo, who is going to dive into this a little bit deeper and share his personal experience as a founder, as an entrepreneur in the fintech space, and let him take it from here. Could I get a round of applause for Lloyd, please? You have Can everyone hear me okay? Not yet.
Not yet. One side.
Thank you.
I guess that's the clicker.
You have a different clicker?
It doesn't work. Let's try that. All right, before we jump into the slides, how many of you are entrepreneurs here in the audience? Great, good number. All based mostly in India? Fantastic. Awesome, I'll give a quick introduction of myself. I am Canadian, American with Indian heritage. My parents are actually from Bangalore and Mumbai. In fact, my cousin is a very popular RJ. I didn't even know she was so popular. And I was talking about on her radio show yesterday about how innovation has come. I'm like surprised by the amount of innovation coming out of India. In any case, so my background, like I said, I'm an entrepreneur. I finished engineering in Canada, and I moved to the US in the early 2000s. And I've been in Silicon Valley for most of my career. Before that, I was in New York and Philly. And when I started my company, I had a very difficult time in Silicon Valley, one, hiring and retaining talent. And because the cost of talent is so high, and culturally the talent does not stick around in Silicon Valley, right? Because the way the mindset of most of the people work there is, what is my equity worth? So if you have a little bit of equity and you're with a company that does not raise a giant round, that means your equity has not gone up. So in 2 years, they're looking for another job. And that was one of the key reasons I decided to expand into Canada. And we have offices in San Francisco, Calgary, Vancouver, and Toronto. What we do is we build technology to automate accounting and finance for SMBs. The long-term vision is to build a robo CFO. We're awesome. So why did I choose Canada? The one thing is very culturally similar to the United States, right? So it's funny, we have more than 500 businesses we work with, and they're large businesses ranging from 30 million in funding to hundreds of millions in revenue. And we're serving the bulk of them from Canada. It's culturally similar. If you have an office in Vancouver, you could serve the West Coast. If you have an office in Toronto, you can serve the East Coast. The language and the cultural similarities just make it easy. The other thing is the talent, right? So in Silicon Valley, there's great talent. There's a lot of people coming out of all these companies, but they don't stick around, number one. And number two, they're not producing as many engineers of specific relevance. Now, Canada makes it easier in that the AI talent that I was looking for is abundant, and there's a lot of universities producing good engineers. So that was the second key point, and I believe it's one of the countries with the most number of educated people in the world, specifically in science and technology. The other thing is government incentives, and I'll dive into this a little bit more. There's a few government incentive programs in Canada that make it just phenomenal to start a business there. In fact, if you look at it by the end of your 1 or 2 years, your first couple of years as a business in Canada, it's almost like every dollar you spend on labor is stretching $2. So that government incentive has been huge for us. The other thing, and this wasn't relevant for me particularly, but Canada has a great immigration program. The US has made it, especially with the new Republican administration, has made it very, very difficult to hire foreign talent, or folks, like the US attracts a lot of foreign students, but if you can't give them visas and keep them there, then you're losing them. So an example is my sister is a lawyer for a large corporate immigration firm, and she works with the Fortune 50 clients. And the Fortune 50 clients are having trouble attracting talent or attracting visas for their talent. For example, when they apply for a visa for someone they've already hired, the government sends a 300-page request for information. That essentially means you're stuck in a loop. So now these companies like the Microsofts and the Ubers and Amazons are introducing lots and lots of jobs because there are some great visa programs in Canada. One, as a founder, you could get a startup visa in a few weeks, or you can set up a company and get a global skills visa in a few weeks, and you can bring talent. And this talent that you bring in, they get permanent residence, and their families get permanent residence. So they have a path to becoming Canadian. I know hundreds of people in the Bay Area who are on H-1Bs and whose spouses can't work. So that's the other part is universities, incubators, support organizations. There's a ton of these ranging from the AI institutes that we talked about in Toronto, Montreal, and Edmonton, and then there are a ton of large government incubators and support orgs. You have to understand the key difference between Canada and the United States is the United States is a capitalist country, Canada is a socialist country, so they do a lot to support the people of the country, right? They want to make sure you're successful, and I have had great experience working with organizations like Launch Academy in Vancouver and Mars in Toronto, and they've really done their best to go out of their way to help our business become successful. Our Toronto office we opened last September is out of Omer's Ventures, which is one of the largest funds in Canada. They have an accelerator, and our office is based out of there, and they've done everything from helping us get talent to connecting us with customers, and something that I would have never expected being in the US, right? That kind of hand-holding or support. Investor interest. So increasingly, I am seeing that there's a lot of Silicon Valley investors interested in investing in Canada. There's no border anymore from that perspective. People are looking outside, and there's hundreds of millions of dollars of funding going into Canadian companies. These are some other things that are of benefit, like one of the lowest income tax rate. I think the lower than this is UK. Best places to do business. So I'll tell you, we started the company in 2012. I have had 2 people leave my company in 6 years. That speaks volumes. The Canadian talent is more loyal. If you treat them well, they stick around. There are other factors outside of money and fast growth that matter to them. And that is really important because a talent is not just talent, right? When you lose somebody, it takes 6 months to hire another person and onboard them. And that costs a lot of disruption to your company. And the setup, right? The setup in Canada, couple days, less than 2 days is how long it takes to get set up in Canada, and that's how easy it is. And this I talked about, but Canada, again, truly is an AI superpower. If you're doing something in fintech, AI, it is a great place to be. All the big tech giants like Google, FB, Amazon, Uber are here and in Canada and growing. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the government incentive programs that really make it worthwhile to start a business there. And after I'll give you the comparison of how it translates to having a business in the US and those. So one of the largest R&D tax programs in the world is in Canada. They give away almost $4 billion every year to companies developing new technology or improving existing technology. And it's called the Scientific Research and Experimental Development Tax Credit Program. And what this program does is, if you're innovating and solving challenges that you cannot resolve with publicly available information, so you're really innovating, you can get depending on what province of Canada you're in, you can get anywhere from 63 to 70% of your development costs. That is Canadian development costs, Canadian salaries and contractor costs, as a cash back. That is huge. You have $1 million in R&D, you're getting 630,000 back. That immediately is huge, right? And I'll give you the comparison because I have a team in the US. I'm technically a Silicon Valley company too. It's 10%. And in the US, that 10% is only if your revenues, that 10% is cash back, only if your revenues are less than 5 million. If your revenues are more than 5 million, you don't get that as a cash back, it's a tax credit. Now if you're burning money, then you're not profitable, so you can't use it to offset taxes. Right? So Canada becomes massively beneficial because they don't look at the top line, they look at your bottom line and how much your net revenue is to give you that cash back. So it's significant. The other program is the Industrial Research Assistance Program. It's by the government, and it's hundreds of millions of dollars every year that is given. And once you establish a project, an innovative project, they could fund 50 to 80% of that up front. So this is not after the fact. Like with the SR&D program, you get the money after you've incurred the expenses. This, they give you money beforehand. So 50 to 80% of your cost, provided it's an innovative project. And that, again, between the two programs, you're already, like, it's I shouldn't say this, but it's close to being free R&D. Now, the R&D tax credit program in the previous slide, that one is near guaranteed. If you're doing R&D and incurring expenses, it's with your taxes, you get that money. There's a 50-50 chance you'll get it, as long as it's an innovative project that's creating an economical benefit in Canada. I've taken advantage of all of them. I can't move it. Oh. You know what? Why don't you change it? You change it, flip it. So the next program is called MyTax, and just flip it. Yeah. So I can't. Why don't you flip it? Just hit next. It's fine. Just hit next. So yeah. So MyTax program. It's great if you're coming to Canada. You want to hire people, but you're not sure, right? And you're not sure who you should hire. This is a program that's done in partnership with universities. They fund you 50% of the cost of a graduate student for 4 months. And so you could define a project. They find you all the candidates who are doing specific research in universities. And I had hired MyTax students in 2012 and 13. And they give you 50% over a 4-month period. You define a project, they work on it, and it's a set outcome. And then you can decide if you want to hire them full time, and they'll attract their friends who are working on that research project. So it's hugely, hugely beneficial. And then I don't want to bore you guys with all this government subsidies, but there's tons of other grants. And there's a link there, just we'll share the slides, but there's a link on the government side. You can see all the grants available. The startup visa, I want to talk about this really quick. It's designed to spur more innovators and entrepreneurs coming to Canada. The US has made it very difficult. Then Canada has gone in the opposite direction and made it easy. And what that means is really, once you apply, it takes 4 to 8 weeks to process. You need to work with a designated organization like an incubator or investor in Canada, which is not difficult. And your whole team can get immigration to Canada. It starts with a work permit that lasts 12 months. And then after that, you and your family can get permanent residence. Now, if you compare that with the US, even if you get an H-1B, your family doesn't get work permits to work. They can't work. But here you could be a full resident of Canada, and that's a huge, huge benefit. And they haven't paid me to say this, by the way. So to be eligible, English speaking, you have to be the owner of your startup, enough money to settle down and transfer your IP to the Canadian organization. And then you need to be affiliated with a designated incubator. I have a list of incubators that do that towards the end, and you can just email me and I'll connect you with somebody if you're interested. All right, we're stuck again. I actually don't know what's next, but switch the slides. I think next I had was the comparison between US and Canada from a cost perspective, right? Already the US dollar to Canadian dollar is 30% higher. So the cost of talent in the US, what I was finding, was between 110 to 200,000, and it can go higher. Like, I have hired product managers from Microsoft. I have hired designers and UX people and engineers from Salesforce. And they cost anywhere between, the 110 is really low-end junior engineers, but 150 to 250 USD. That is significant. And if you factor in the cost of people whose average tenure in your company is 2 to 3 years, that's a huge cost. Now, if you compare that with 65 to 120,000 Canadian, and then the average lifespan of a Canadian employee is 5 years, that gives you a huge boost already. Then I talked about the better government incentives, like 60% versus 10 to 15%, lower talent turnover, lower real estate costs. Quite frankly, the real estate costs in the US are astronomical, right? You can't, like, especially in New York, if any hubs that you're looking to be in to sell, it's very expensive. It's not so much in Canada. And the last thing to summarize is the better immigration benefits. Here, I'm just going to quickly summarize some incubators here. You can take a photo of this, but Ontario, the big ones are Mars, DMZ, Communitech, Techstars. And if you're in artificial intelligence, then Creative Destruction Labs, or CDL. BC Launch Academy is a huge one. We partner very closely with them, and we co-host a massive conference in Canada with them called Traction. But Launch Academy is one of the authorized incubators for Startup Visa. So they're the guys to contact if you're interested in exploring Startup Visa. And then Alberta has the AI Institute and Startup Calgary and Edmonton. And then Quebec has a number of incubators, accelerators as well. And these are truly like, they're not just there for lip service. I have worked with several of them, and the experience has just been phenomenal. And I'm saying this because in my, when I started the company, I was also a venture partner in a large US accelerator incubator, so I can give you the proper comparison. So if you have any questions, just email me. It's simple, Lloyed@Boast.AI. But let's take some questions for a couple of minutes. No? Going there. We'll do Q&A at the end. Sorry.
Can I get a round of applause? Thank you very much for Lloyd. We're just going to do a quick exchange of microphones here, and I'll do a song and dance in the meantime. A couple of things. One, we have a really nice booth. You can find it because it's identified by a polar bear. You can't miss it. We're going to be there for the next 3 days. Please come and talk to us if you have questions. We are trying to save a few minutes to do Q&A at the end of this, but I know that every business situation is unique, and so we'd love to talk to you about it. I'll be there, as will the rest of our team, and so we'll be happy to chat with you. My colleague, Jonathan Coopy, who just stood up over here, is another face to look for, as well as Arbinder Pal, who's over here on this side. And without further ado, I'm going to say, can we turn it back to the first presentation that we had, slide number 1? Excellent. Next up is Canada's Consul General in Mumbai, Ms. Annie Dubé. She's going to give a quick couple of remarks and overview of some of the ways that Canada can actually help you as entrepreneurs. So please, a round of applause.
Good luck. Thank you. Hi. You can hear me? Yeah? Sound is fine?
Maybe a microphone turned on.
I don't know if yeah, I think I hear myself now. Okay. Hi, how are you doing? My name is Annie Dubé. I'm the Consul General of Canada here in Mumbai. I'm sorry I was stuck in traffic, and this has nothing to do with all the great construction that is happening here in Mumbai. Is it too loud? It sounds too loud. Canada is really a great country, not just because I love my country, but because we have developed an ecosystem that is fantastic for entrepreneurs from all around the world. And you heard a lot of the advantages that we have to offer through Lloyd's presentation. And so you'll see that mine is slightly redundant or a lot redundant. So I'll skip some of the slides, but the point here, I don't like it. There. The point here is I really want you to grasp more about what Canada has to offer and interact with us. So there's going to be a Q&A. Lloyd will have all the answers for you, or the trade team here. The Trade Commissioner Service is available if you decide to invest in Canada. This one, right? Oh, yay. You know, there's great advantages in considering Canada, not only because of our ecosystem, but also because of the people-to-people ties. There's 1.4 million people of Indian origins, and Canadians generally, 1 out of 5 Canadians were born outside of Canada. The value of considering an ecosystem that is so diversified in terms of human resource and the talent pool is only going to bring more benefits to your companies. The two-way foreign direct investment between Canada and India was estimated at around $4.3 billion in 2014. Today, it's $22 billion. Here you can see why companies see Canada as a premier investment destination. We offer a highly skilled workforce, along with a strong and stable business climate. Canada benefits from a sound, efficient financial system supported by low taxes and business costs. The government is also investing in the innovative, clean, inclusive economy of tomorrow. Recently, the federal government invested $950 million in 5 superclusters across Canada. The digital technology supercluster on the West Coast, the protein industry in the prairies, the advanced manufacturing superclusters in South Ontario, the AI superclusters in Montreal, and ocean technology superclusters on the East Coast. And this is government support to make sure that the ecosystem is stronger, bringing the private partner, the universities, so that you have all the key players developing and accelerating their growth. We have competitive sectors, and I just mentioned some superclusters. There's also the regular clusters that you can see across Canada, including in advanced manufacturing, in agri-food and food processing, in clean technology, in life sciences, ICT, services, education and infrastructure. What we found was quite interesting was to see the interest from Indian companies. There's close to 100 Indian companies that have established in Canada, and these ones are only a few of the examples that we have, and they keep growing. They found the value proposition is real, and it has direct impact on their bottom line. The other side is also true. We have strong Canadian companies having a presence in India, and so the bilateral trade and the foreign direct investment both ways keep growing. So here you have a few examples of Canadian companies. The important component there is in recent years, the institutional investors, the pension funds, have invested close to $20 billion in India, which is money invested. Today, I tweeted just like half an hour ago, Omer's venture has just invested in an infrastructure fund here in India. And so the reality is it goes really both ways. There's a lot of different components here that has been covered, and so I will not go through all the slides. All I want you to do is make sure you connect with us. We have a lot of the right information for you to bring your business to the next level. Through our FTA agreements, we have free trade agreements. The North American free trade agreements was just renegotiated. We have a free trade agreement with the EU. We just completed, and one that just came into force, the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP. So we have an FTA with Japan, Vietnam, and a few other Asian countries. All of this, our network of FTAs, means that you access 1.5 billion consumers establishing your presence in Canada. And that is real business value. I will not keep going with the slides, so you know. But all of this to say, I'm very excited to engage with you today. Fintegrate is a great platform for us. In terms of innovation, we keep investing in the innovation ecosystem in Canada, and we hope to have you there. You heard about the global skills strategy. There's also a visa startup program for entrepreneurs wanting to establish in Canada and grow from Canada. And please come and ask us. I think we're going to open soon for Q&A. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, everyone. I'll jump back up here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We are here. The three of us are going to, Lloyd, come on back up. We'll share a microphone. We have a few minutes. If there's some general questions that we could answer for you, some details that you'd like to get into, we'd be happy to indulge those. Otherwise, please keep our faces in mind. We made the introductions earlier. We'll be at the Canada booth. We're happy to talk to you. That's why we're here. So please stop by. And we can actually talk how we might be able to help your business. In the meantime, are there any questions that you'd like to raise right now?
See, you mentioned that in that eligibility conditions, eligibility for startups, you mentioned that you should transfer your willingness to transfer your IP to a Canadian organization.
So what that means is really, they want the Canadian entity to be your HQ, essentially.
Achha. So suppose I got a patent with me, so I should transfer it to the Canadian company registered in Canada.
Precisely, right? And there is some nuances there too. It's not all black and white, right? So it could be that I'm starting my company here and any new IP developed will be here as well.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay. Well, if that's the case, that's wonderful. It means I think we did a great job and got some information to you. Please come see us. We'd love to talk about your business and how we can help. So again, thank you very much for coming out this morning, and give yourselves a round of applause for making the effort. Thank you.